Hello and welcome to my channel, iWinDeluxe Gaming. What do you get when you mix vampires, jet thrusters, and a crippling crush on Phaethon? That's right, it's a Vivian guide video. In this ultimate guide, we'll go over everything you need to know about Vivian. Vivian is an ether anomaly agent who specializes in ablooming her teammates' anomaly damage, as well as dealing some decent supplementary corrosion related damage herself. And with a blatant disregard for lower body in-flight safety protocols, the only thing hotter than her propulsion system is her undying love for Phaethon. In this video, we'll see just how far simping for Phaethon can get you by going over her entire kit, best drives and stats, Wengens, Mindscapes, teams, a showcase, and finally my opinion on Vivian at the end of the video. This video was filmed on the early access server and is not indicative of the final product. There may be some changes on release, so be sure to check the comments down below to see if there are any. Vivian's kit is actually very complicated, but we're going to hopefully simplify it so that even a vampire can understand. Vivian's kit revolves around flight feathers and guard feathers. Flight feathers are indicated by this middle dot being lit up, and here we can see we have 2 flight feathers. And if we use some basic attacks to get her into butt jetpack mode, aka fluttering frock as it's called in game, Vivian can now perform basic attack fluttering frock suspension, which she's invincible during and which also converts her flight feathers into guard feathers. Guard feathers are indicated by this outer ring being lit up. So why are these feathers important? So Vivian will consume a guard feather when any character hits an enemy with an EX special. So he has no elemental gauges on him, but we're gonna use Ambi's EX special. And we can see that bit of ether damage, which, well, did some ether damage and also filled up a bit of ether anomaly. Now, more importantly, if the enemy has an attribute anomaly on them, so let's go ahead and apply assault. You will see this Abloom pop up, and we're gonna hit it with another EX special. You can see this Abloom pop up again. And finally, why the heck, one more time, Abloom popped up again. So what the heck is Abloom? Well, it's from her core ability, which if the enemy has an anomaly on them, hitting an enemy with Feather Bloom will trigger an Abloom that scales off of how much damage the anomaly did to the enemy. Abloom damage also scales based on Vivian's anomaly proficiency stat, as well as what element it is. For example, one Abloom number that does stand out is Assault, and while it might look low at 47.93% of the last Assault's damage, yes, Abloom does scale off of, for example, Jane's massive crit damage Assaults, and you can often deal 3 to 4 of these Ablooms during one of Jane's assaults, which can double or nearly triple Jane's assault damage output. And also in her core skills additional ability, where you need an anomaly character or another ether character on her team. Basically, when another character applies an attribute anomaly on the enemy, Vivian will also attack the enemy with basic attack Feather Bloom and consume 1 guard feather. Okay, let's take a quick look at this clip, and right here at this still shot, you can see that there are actually 2 Ablooms, both scaling off of Jane's assault number right there. And the reason why this is happening is because Jane used an EX special to activate assault, which triggered the additional ability from Vivian's passive, as well as the standard Feather Bloom activation, which is to hit an enemy with an EX special. And one more quick note about her additional ability. It does specifically say when Vivian's ally, so this means that if Vivian triggers a corrosion, she won't get an additional Abloom via her triggering corrosion. Although Vivian's EX special will still be able to trigger Abloom. As we can see, Vivian will want to spend as many guard feathers as possible to trigger as many Ablooms as possible, effectively multiplying the amount of anomaly damage dealt to the enemy. As such, her gameplay loop is quite simple. Generate flight feathers, convert them to guard feathers, apply anomalies to the enemy, and smack the enemy with EX specials like they owe you some limited edition Phaethon merch. Now the next question is, how does Vivian generate flight feathers? First, we have her EX special, which costs 60 energy and generates 3 flight feathers. Well, if you use her EX special, I've swapped to Jane, she will automatically cast that basic attack fluttering frock suspension, which converts her feathers, her flight feathers, over into guard feathers, and she happens to be invincible during that fluttering frog suspension attack. So this means that you can pretty much instantly swap cancel her EX special, and she will automatically perform basic attack fluttering frog suspension to generate and convert 3 flight feathers to guard feathers. And before continuing, just know that every single thing that generates flight feathers for Vivian will automatically follow it up with fluttering frog suspension. So you should swap cancel when possible out of all of the following ways to generate flight feathers. Anyway, the next way for her to generate flight feathers is through her basic attack waltz, which generates 1 flight feather. You can perform basic attack waltz when she enters spinny umbrella mode. Thumbs up this video if you think Hoiver should hire me to name abilities. And Vivian enters spinny umbrella mode after, before, a quick assist, or a dodge counter. Generally speaking, the most practical things to actually enter spinny umbrella mode are via quick assist and dodge counter. As an extra bonus, waltz has a built-in dodge, which if you dodge an enemy attack with, will generate 1 additional flight feather. The next method to generate flight feathers is through her chain attack, which simply generates 2 flight feathers. And her ultimate generates a whopping 5 flight feathers. Finally, we have her defensive assist into assist follow-up, which generates 2 flight feathers, making Vivian a unique anomaly agent that is nicely rewarded for performing defensive assists. This leads us to some bread and butter attack strings to generate 5 flight feathers. So what ends up happening quite often with Vivian is you will do a defensive assist to get 2, you use her EX special to get 3 more flight feathers, and we can see there that now she has all 5 guard feathers. Another option, which is helpful against enemies where defensive assists are a rarity, is you can perform a quick assist, then basic attack waltz, EX special cancel, then you can do a basic attack waltz again. I didn't mention this earlier because of information overload, but you can actually cancel the jet butt pack mode by holding dash during the EX special. And when canceled during her EX special, now Vivian will go into spinny umbrella mode. One more useful thing to know about her feathers is that you can have up to 5 of each feather. This is getting into more min-maxy territory, but you can store additional flight feathers for use later, so as not to overcap on guard feathers. For most of us though, like myself included, we'll just be automatically converting our feathers most of the time. There are a couple more details I should mention as well. For example, part of Vivian's core ability actually applies Vivian's prophecy to an enemy suffering from anomaly if her feather bloom hits an enemy with an anomaly on them. This Vivian's prophecy continues to deal a tiny amount of damage every 0.55 seconds, and while this tiny bit of damage can crit, more importantly, it's useful for triggering anomaly ticks like for shock and corrosion, where normally you have to hit the enemy regularly to actually activate the shock and corrosion damage. And another one, the next supplementary detail of her kit is that her corruption damage and corruption disorder are increased by 12%, which is a nice boost to her corrosion type damage. And there are certainly more details that I've not mentioned in this video, but hopefully this information will be a good start for you to start corrupting and blooming your friendly neighborhood ethereals. For her talent priority, prioritize her core above all else. As we can see, her damage distribution is mostly all based on her ablooms, which scale off of her core ability, as well as she does some decent damage with corrosion and disorder, and all this damage isn't affected by her talent levels. Her talent levels, which makes up her crit scaling damage, only makes up a measly 13% or so of her damage output, which makes leveling her talents not particularly important. Anyway, after her core ability, you can level her basics, and then after that, her specials, chain and assist, and then followed by her dodge. We've made it to the nerdy math stuff of the video, starting with Vivian's drive sets. Alright, before continuing, let me just say the calcs for her are an absolute nightmare because there are so many variables to assume, but fortunately the main takeaways end up being reasonably consistent. Vivian, being the vampire that she is, really likes Phaethon. Okay, I was hoping to have something more clever for that, but that's why for the drive set, just use the 4-piece Phaethon's Melody for Vivian. Vivian appreciates the 8% Anomaly Mastery from the 2-piece set bonus, which as a reminder, Anomaly Mastery increases the amount of ether she applies. And the 4-piece set bonus effectively gives her 45% Anomaly Proficiency whenever an EX special is used on her team, as well as 25% ether damage whenever a teammate uses an EX special. For the 2-piece set, I recommend the 2-piece Freedom Blues or the 2-piece Chaos Jazz. Vivian scales best off of the Anomaly Proficiency stat since it boosts all of her damage, including her Abloom damage that scale off of her allies' Anomaly damage. You can consider the 2-piece Freedom Blues plus 2-piece Chaotic Metal plus 2-piece something else while you're farming for the 4-piece Faithins, but any other combination just isn't really recommended for Vivian, so you'll definitely want to eventually end up with the 4-piece Faithins. For the main stats, I recommend Anomaly Proficiency in slot 4, Ether Damage in slot 5, and Anomaly Mastery in slot 6. For slot 4, there's no question about it, just use Anomaly Proficiency since she scales best off of Anomaly Proficiency. For slot 5, swapping to attack percent or pen ratio doesn't lead to a huge amount of damage loss, so if they roll a lot more Anomaly Proficiency substat rolls than your Ether damage, they can be worth considering. Similarly, attack percent in slot 6 increases Vivian's own damage substantially, generally enough to compensate for lower uptime on corrosion, and overall, either Anomaly Mastery or attack percent are great in slot 6, with my personal preference being Anomaly Mastery for more frequent and consistent corrosion application. Next we have Vivian's substats. It's actually very simple, just get as much Anomaly Proficiency as possible. Attack percent is not a wasted roll though, so it's fine to get some of those as well. Sadly, all the other substats are pretty bad on her. Well, that was actually a lot easier to explain than I expected. Fortunately, building Vivian is quite simple. Just simp for Faithin with Faithin's Melody and get as much Anomaly Proficiency as possible. Up next we have Vivian's Wenjins. Breaking news! Local Faithin Simp's signature Wenjin, Flight of Fancy, is her best option. This thing has Anomaly Proficiency as its secondary stat, and it provides 40% more Anomaly buildup for her, and most importantly, it basically gives her another 120 Anomaly Proficiency since she constantly deals ether damage. In total, this Wenjin gives her 210 Anomaly Proficiency, higher than any other Wenjin. Besides her signature Wenjin though, overall her next best option, which also happens to be her best free-to-play friendly option, is the Weeping Gemini. Since it's craftable, you'll be able to get it to upgrade 5. For every anomaly applied to the target, Vivian gains 48 Anomaly Proficiency up to 4 times. However, once the target either dies or recovers from a stun, this is reset back to 0. In long fights and Deadly Assault, you won't have much difficulty maintaining stacks on this thing, especially for some of the bosses where you only stun them twice with an anomaly team over the entire 3 minutes. As such, it's actually pretty common to maintain an average of over 3 stacks, and in this situation, in theory it can do up to 86% of her signature Wenjin's damage. Unfortunately, for shorter fights or faster stunning situations, the Weeping Gemini performs much worse, at around 76% of her signature Wenjin. So yeah, it has a very wide range, but it's a great free-to-play friendly option with a high potential damage ceiling. Up next, I'd say her next best option is the Battle Pass Wenjin, the Electro Lip Gloss, especially at upgrade 5. You'll generally have an anomaly on the enemy, so this thing's passive is pretty easy to maintain. However, the attack and bonus damage only buff Vivian's personal damage and don't improve her Abloom damage that scales off of her teammates, which is why it ends up falling short. The Rainforest Gourmet is also a usable Wenjin on Vivian, like it is on literally any stun agent, so if you don't have the resources for Weeping Gemini, feel free to use this in the meantime. I've included other Wenjins as well, so feel free to take a look at this chart, but they are either all just notably worse or something you'd rather use on another agent like Jane's Signature, the Sharpened Stinger, which you should be using on Jane instead of Vivian. We've made it to Vivian's Mindscapes. And investment priority. Since this is the part with the worst viewer retention, here is Vivian when she sees Faithin. Her Mindscape 1 honestly seems like a pretty insane Mindscape, providing effectively more flight feathers and also increasing all anomaly and disorder damage received by targets under Vivian's prophecy by 16%. Now you're going to see wildly different numbers for her Mindscape 1 between different theory crafters, so I've decided to land somewhere in the middle. Basically, her Mindscape 1 gives 1 flight feather for every 4 guard feathers spent, and of course, spending that additional free flight feather also counts towards this. This leads to 33% additional feathers if you're able to spend them all optimally. However, I've assumed just 66% efficiency of spending additional feathers. With this in mind, her Mindscape 1 is as such very powerful, as it also increases the anomaly damage dealt. As such, since the Weeping Gemini is a great option for more difficult fights like Deadly Assault, generally speaking, I recommend her Mindscape 1 over her signature Wenjin. These additional feathers are also very helpful in fights with minimal defense assist opportunities, as you'll have more opportunities to generate feathers. Also, her Mindscape 1 is a stepping stone towards Mindscape 2, which is frankly just quite broken, increasing her Abloom damage by 30% with an additional 15% res shred, making it completely busted. So yeah, in short, I recommend going for her Mindscape 1 and Mindscape 2 before her signature Wenjin. After her Mindscape 2 though, I would get her signature Wenjin. Mindscape 3 is unsurprisingly pretty terrible because she scales poorly with her talent levels. Mindscape 4 starts the fight off with 5 additional guard feathers, as well as giving Vivian 12% mega attack. Mindscape 5 is also terrible because she scales very poorly off of her talent levels, and Mindscape 6 is a massive headache, and there's honestly no great way to calculate this. Just like, well, frankly, all the calcs in this video. But the real value of her Mindscape 6 is being able to front load a ton of nuke Abloom damage. Essentially, Vivian will spend all her guard feathers every time she uses her butt jetpack attack. This scales comically with Mindscapes on her teammates. So if you're a whale and you've reached this point, you'll be clearing content way faster than what the calcs here reflect, because she scales off of her teammates as well. Anyway, this is a broken Mindscape, especially if you've horizontally scaled with another anomaly agent, like with a $2,000 Jane as a teammate. Fortunately for teams, Vivian is fairly straightforward despite being such a complicated character. She does great with literally any other anomaly agent. Let's start with, in my opinion, her best feeling team with Jane and Astra. Jane deals massive instances of assault damage, and Vivian can effectively double or even triple the amount of assault damage that Jane does. Astra Yao is great because when she triggers her Tremolo, which is her shiny quick assist, it counts as an EX special for just 25 energy, making Astra Yao a very efficient way to activate Ablooms. Also, Astra is perfect because she's able to provide full buff uptime on both Vivian and Jane, and the additional quick assist on Vivian also improves her feather generation as well. Of course, you can substitute Astra Yao with other supports like Lucy, Caesar, Nicole, Seth, etc., but I do think Astra Yao, at least as of Vivian's release, is the best option. And as mentioned, you can use literally any anomaly agent, with one of Vivian's most accessible free-to-play friendly teams being Piper and Lucy. Piper is unique in that she can, for very little energy, activate 2 guard feathers with her enhanced EX special. A funny team that I honestly kind of like is with Bernice, as now you have no on-field agent. Still, this is a pretty solid team as Bernice can burn through Vivian's feathers very efficiently. And needless to say, Vivian works great with electric anomaly agents like Yanagi and Grace. Now, I have seen many people ask, is Vivian good with Miyabi? The answer is yes, she is. Vivian is a great low field time disorder triggerer for Miyabi, which helps build up Miyabi's blue balls. Vivian's Abloom damage does take a big hit though, because Miyabi is not built to maximize shatter damage, which is what Vivian's Abloom damage scales off of. It scales off of shatter and not frostburn, but Miyabi herself does a ton of damage to compensate. Now, in terms of whether or not she's better than Yanagi for Miyabi, and personally I think Yanagi is just better for Miyabi than Vivian is, because Yanagi's polarity disorders are simply too efficient for giving Miyabi her blue balls. Anyway, a couple less mainstream teams are a triple anomaly team. If you love pure chaos, then a team like this is a lot of fun. Although I don't think it's better than Astra Yao variants, it's perfectly functional in the least functional way, which is what makes it great. And finally, I don't strongly recommend this next team, but I wanted to point it out for those who might not have the aforementioned options. It's a hyper corrosion team with, something like Astra plus Nicole, which focuses on maximizing corrosion damage and corrosion Ablooms. This team felt noticeably worse than the previous teams and will likely require more experimentation, but it is an idea I thought was worth mentioning. Alright, I got a few additional runs to supplement my previous Vivian Creator Experience Server video where I already did quite a few runs there. If you want to see a more free-to-play friendly team with Piper, as well as the build that I used for it, and for that video I also have, I think, a Miyabi team as well as an M0U1 Jane team. So for this video, not to overlap with that one too much, I decided to include 3 additional runs, with this first team being a pure chaos team with triple anomaly, Bernice, Vivian as well as Jane. So we do have an on-fielder with Jane to drive the two other more off-field anomaly agents. And this team is a lot of fun, although I got to be completely honest, I don't know what I'm doing with this team. And I also only did one run attempt for these additional teams because, let's be real, I spent so much time on this video. So please don't take these scores as anything indicative of, something that's extremely, extremely anecdotal, which is also why I didn't really want to include like the scores comparisons for the previous video, because really including the buffs that we have for this, as well as the enemy weakness to account for and the enemy debuffs, the way that these scores are never really truly balanced. At least it's pretty hard to make it truly balanced due to all these variables. So yeah, I mean, characters are designed for specific fights, and that's just the way it is in Zenless Zone Zero, or frankly most of these gacha games that we play these days. But anyway, there is obviously a ton of room to improve for this pure chaos team, but even then, his pure chaos team with all signature wenches, by the way, M0 UN investments, to manage a pretty modest 32,912 score. Modest in terms of the investment level, in my opinion, as well as, the amount of effort that I put into it. So this next team is really interesting. It is a hyper corrosion team, and I feel like there can definitely be some better like teammate choices. I was thinking perhaps even like a character like Sokaku might be better than Nicole here to provide longer lasting buffs. And I actually need to test if Sokaku's EX special actually activates feathers, because one big issue with this team is you have the goal is to maximize the ether Abloom damage, and I definitely think Nicole is going to be a better like damage amplifier than, for example, what's Sokaku's face. However, the thing about this is that you cannot spend, or at least I could not spend my feathers at all. I was always like super capped on feathers, even though the corrosion damage numbers are actually looking pretty healthy. The Abloom damage numbers, like, over 300,000 damage here and there, 400,000 ether Abloom there. Now, I think if we optimize the rotations a bit by having Astro Yao as well as Nicole actually somehow manage to trigger the corruptions to, increase the number of feathers that you can spend. But yeah, this team it's all going to be about how can you spend more feathers. And honestly, with a single run, there's no way I'm going to be able to optimize anything like that. So yeah, perhaps even a different team choice, but I think it's actually viable. And I think players are going to need to experiment a bit more than I've had time to, because there's just so many characters, so many teams, so many variables, and you can only really spend so much time on each of them. And in my case, literally just one run each. I had to edit this entire video, as well as just put everything together. It's a ton of work. The calcs for this character, oh my god, took way too long, way longer than I like to admit, even though the takeaways were pretty obvious, frankly speaking. But just the amount of calcs and the amount of work that it took was a ton, and I had to consult multiple friends of mine, including, seeing which, I'm Rivenous, as well as the good people over at Pridewind. Do check them out, and especially for I'm Rivenous, I wish I had the time to write a proper plug for his website, and unfortunately it's here kind of at the end of this video. But yeah, definitely check out his new website, which is a pretty cool statistics aggregator, as well as like basically the Akasha network for Genshin, but here for Zenless Zone Zero. And Rivenous and his friends have been updating the site and just really adding a lot of features to it. So even if it's missing some features now, you can sure as heck be darn that they're going to be adding it soon enough. Anyway, this next team is the Omega Leviathan team. I was yapping about I'm Rivenous' site this entire team. Didn't even talk about the current run that's going on. Omega Leviathan team, M6, U5, all across the board. Single run, obviously, no issue with getting 60,000 for this for this mission, and I sure as heck hope so if you're spending like almost $6,000 here. So very expensive team. You can see some absolutely massive Ablooms, and I don't think I'm fully utilizing Vivian's Mindscape 6 properly here, and I think that's going to be key, is to figure out how you can basically get those super big Mindscape 6 nukes on top of assaults. But for my single run, well, this is what I ended up with, which was, probably in all things considered a pretty slow, 77-second clear time. And here's one last goofy clip with a 10 million damage Abloom against a level 10 enemy in training mode, just for fun. I just want to see what kind of number I could get on the screen, and hey, there you go. So let me know what you think about Vivian down in the comments below. And I gotta be completely honest, she definitely seems like a bit like Kafka on her release, supporting essentially dot characters or anomaly characters in Zenless Zone Zero's case. And the good news though is that the anomaly characters that she is supporting is not only literally Black Swan and I guess was Sampo or something. That's like all Kafka had as options. But in this case, for Vivian, she's got a lot more options, and hopefully Zenless Zone Zero, keeps updating previous anomaly agents as well as introducing a couple new ones and perhaps characters that might be able to work with Vivian. And one thing that's really interesting about the current characters for Vivian, it's only really Jane right now that maximizes the actual anomaly damage. For example, characters like Bernice don't really have anything in their kit that jacks up the burn ticks, and same with Yanagi, same with Miyabi. They don't have anything in their kits that jack up the shock values or jack up the shatter value in the case of Miyabi for Vivian to take full advantage of. So me personally, I'm hoping for some additional support, more so than, for example, what Kafka got in Honkai Star Rail moving forward. But as of release, as you can see, Vivian is quite a flexible character, and I really got to hand it to the Zenless Zone Zero team. They are great at making characters that, can work interchangeably between multiple teams. And in Vivian's case, she does a great job enhancing other anomaly agents. And yeah, if you like the anomaly playstyle and you're willing to put in the extra brain power and IQ and problem solving and practice in order to get it to work, Vivian is going to be a good character for you. But if anomaly is not really your thing, and if perhaps, you might struggle managing all the different resources, personally, Vivian might not be the best choice for your account. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about Vivian down in the comments below, and if I missed anything for this guide video. And don't forget to check out I'm Rivenous, his new site. Link will be down below. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.